In this video, we are going to make a few changes to our data structure. Now, if you open up the models and the passenger interface, what we're actually going to do is change this children property to baggage. So if you want to go ahead and change yours and simply change it to a type of string. Now, because we're not using children anymore, we also do not need this child interface. So we can go ahead and completely remove that as well. And then finally, what we're going to do inside the passenger detail component is actually remove these children from here, because we're essentially going to be destroying these pieces of data, and we're going to change our data structure for the purposes of this video. So the next thing is to open up your db.json. Now, currently you will have all these children properties. So if you want to highlight them all and just change those over to baggage, now you can simply leave them as empty strings if you like. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll create these as empty strings. This one's going to also be an empty string, and we'll just change this one over to an empty string as well. So what we'll be doing in our template forms is allowing the template driven forms to actually drive these changes. Now you can see here that we have 1, 2, 4. So we're missing passenger 3. So I'm going to add another passenger back, and I'm just going to call this one Todd. So we can just leave that as is. So now we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 passenger objects. What we need to do is open up our terminal and actually restart the server. So any changes that we make to the local database, we're going to need to recompile. So once that's done and out of the way, what we need to do is create a new component in this components folder. So go ahead and create a new folder, and this one is going to be called something simple called passenger form. Now inside of here, what we want to do is create the form definitions. So we'll do passenger-form.component.ts. I'm going to copy that value, and then next to it, I'm going to create the SAS file for it. So we'll just do passenger-form.component.scss, and you can see here our folder structure. So we don't actually need this passenger form CSS at the moment, so we'll close that off. But what we're going to do is essentially pass some data down into this form component, and this will then be used throughout the videos to actually teach you how to use the forms based off of the data that we've just created in our passenger viewer. So essentially what we want to use inside of here is this new passenger form component. We haven't registered it in our module yet, but what we'll do instead of printing out this passenger object is actually pass it into a binding. So we'll pass it into a binding called detail. So we have the binding, and we'll pass that passenger object, which comes through asynchronously from our service call. So now that that has been created, we need to obviously fill in our component. So let's do import and then component. I will import that from @angular/core again. We'll create the component definition. And what we'll do is create a selector called passenger-form, which then matches the file name. We'll also set up the style URLs so they're all ready to go. So what we'll do is then passenger-form.component.scss. So now we have everything available. We'll also create the base template. So this is going to be an ES6 string again. And all you can do for now is just create a form tag, and we'll just leave it at that, and we'll just put form inside of here. Now, because this is a component class, we need to export the actual class name. So what we'll do is export the class called passenger form component. And because we've just created an input binding called detail inside of here, we need to actually copy this value, and we're going to have a property called detail. Now, the passenger object is going to be passed through. So we need to actually grab this passenger object. So again, above here, what we can do is import that object. So we'll do import the passenger from, and then /models/passenger.interface. So we've got the detail, it's going to be a passenger. Now the next step is telling it that it's going to be an input. So we just import that input again, and we'll just simply decorate that property to say that the detail is then going to be passenger. And just to display this out, what we can do is then do detail, and we'll just use that JSON pipe that we learned about. And we'll save that out, and what we'll do is then go ahead and register it in our module. So if you open up your passenger dashboard module, we can then go ahead and register this component. So what I'm going to do is duplicate one of these, and we'll change this to passenger form component. We'll change the passenger detail. We'll rename this to passenger form so it can find this passenger form component. Inside our declarations, we've imported it last, so we'll add it last in here. We don't need to export it because we're not using it in our other module, and it's just a child component of that module. So that's everything you need to do to set up our base form. However, to actually start building out our form, what we need to do inside this file is import the forms module. So what we can do is import and then forms module. So this is another Angular module, so Angular, and this is going to be from Angular/forms. Now we need to go down into our ng module, and we're just going to register it and say that we can use the forms module. So this will give us the access to directives such as ng model, which we covered very early on in the course, just as a quick demonstration, but now we have full access to Angular's forms module. So now that you've done that, you can simply close it off. We have the passenger form, we have the passenger viewer, and at the moment we don't actually need to use this file, so what we can do is simply close this one off as well, and what we'll start building out is this passenger form. Before we do this, we're going to go and check it out in the browser, so we'll just wrap this in a div real quick. So save that out, and we'll go to the browser and take a look. So hopefully in the browser you should see something like form and then the JSON object printed out. Now you can see this one has baggage, so our actual data structure in the db.json has been updated. And what we're going to use is a bunch of different inputs such as radios, checkboxes, text inputs, number inputs to basically recreate these via Angular's template forms. Now we can confirm this, that we are using the passenger form as you can see in here. So we have our passenger viewer, which then binds to our passenger form. So anything inside of here is in fact our input data, which means anytime we make a request or want to update something, it will then be populated back down to the form. And as you might have guessed it, in the later videos, we're going to emit that changed value via an event and then make another service call to basically update this whole passenger object, which will then update the API.